Hi, everyone. My name's Dr. Mike Bummer, and welcome to a somewhat belated edition of Car Crash Wednesday that we are doing on Friday afternoon. I hope everyone had a wonderful week. And today's case is going to be something a little different. It actually deals with a work injury. But before we jump into that, I got to introduce this my partner, friend, colleague on my right, on my left is Dr. Armin Feldman.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Car Crash Wednesday Live because it's on a Friday.
Yeah, fantastic. And Armin, before we jumped in here, you had told me you got a haircut, and I noticed that I think we go to the same barber.
That's true, Mike.
Now let's see okay, good. We actually had a little bit, maybe of a little technical error there. It actually, the screen I was on, and I don't know if the people watching this got a hiccup or not, but I saw it quickly jump up and say we might not be live, and then we did. So if that's the case, we apologize. Technology is what it is, but if that was seamless, then even better. So let's jump right in. Oh, before we jump in, we got to mention, because if you're watching the show today and you have any questions or comments whatsoever, first and foremost, feel free to put them in the comments section below. LinkedIn does save them and we can get back to you. Secondly, if you have a case you want to discuss, if you want to find out more about our services, go ahead and send us an email to comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. Whatever you might want to know about, whether you want a version of this redacted report or some of the other reports that you've seen on other shows that we've done. And of course, tune into our podcast at physicianshelpingattorneys.com. We are broadcasting on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we have a very good listenership. We're getting 30 to 40 downloads pretty much right away per episode. And we just breached, I think, the 1,000 download mark. You sent me an email, right, Armin?
That is correct. Yeah, it's pretty thrilling.
Awesome. So again, feel free to reach out to us. But today's case, and I'm going to turn off some of the tech here and then share the screen. Today's case, Armin, involves a work injury, and even more specifically, a work injury with not a lot of medical care directly immediately after the injury. And there was some questions regarding if this injury could have been related to this incident at work.
Right. And Mike, I think we're a little different in our own consulting work. You are more focused on the PI side, although obviously you do work injuries as well. And I'd say I'm fairly balanced at about 50-50. Workers' compensation, working with workers' compensation attorneys and personal injury attorneys. So it'll be fun to see this report.
Perfect. So this was a 60-year-old gentleman. This is all redacted if you didn't already notice. And he sustained this work-related injury on May 7th of 2019. And to clarify the events and make sure that we were able to understand and separate this from kind of a secondary gain or a malingering of sorts, the gentleman's wife and 32-year-old daughter also joined me. Actually, no, I conducted a second interview with them. So the first phone interview was with him on June 4th, and then a second interview with the wife and daughter on June 8th. Have you had to do this before, Armin?
Yeah, it depends on the case, right? Most of the time, we're going to be interviewing the client of the attorney. Sometimes it's absolutely critical, essential, that we interview loved ones. Of course, Mike, as you know, this is fairly common. For example, someone has a head injury and the symptoms of the head injury don't make it into the medical record immediately, but even though the symptoms started immediately, but they don't make it into the medical record immediately. And often it's very helpful to interview loved ones, business associates, other people that are close to the injured person, And that helps us to document that even though the report of the symptoms aren't immediate, the symptoms themselves were.
So this gentleman was manager at a donut shack at this fictitious place in Lincoln, New York. And he suffered his injury in the morning. He said he was in the walk-in freezer, lifting a bagel box, turned his body. This is classic. I think of moms with young children in minivans who lift and turn, and they get these back injuries.
Right.
And he cited that his store was short-staffed and he was trying to move quickly, not surprisingly. Later that day, he shared that a coworker even saw him in significant pain and said, "Listen, you need to go see a doctor." And he said it was 9 out of 10 pain. He went to see his doctor that same day, who ended up being a nurse practitioner, mid-level provider for his PCP. And interestingly, this might have been the problem, and these things happen in the real world. They took a full history from him, and he said he had been having some chest pain that also started the day before. Right away, the nurse practitioner shifted gears and started to really focus, as he said, on his chest pain, because she was worried about what was going to potentially, be life-threatening in that moment, which was a heart attack.
Sure.
He did say he expressed his leg pain and weakness to the nurse practitioner, but it seemed to be overshadowed by his chest pain. So he actually had a history of this Arnold-Chiari malformation and some chronic low back pain and leg pain, for which he had documented visits with his chiropractor 2 months prior to the injury, and it documented chronic low back pain and left leg pain. But he reported that prior to this injury, this event, his pain was more achy, more sore, and icy hot treatment and Motrin would help. And he said it wouldn't really hold him back. He was a pretty high functioning gentleman. He said it was about a 3 out of 10 on a 10-point scale. And he did say he had some right leg numbness years ago, but his PCP told him to stop sleeping with his dog, and the numbness went away. He probably was positional. Again, this conversation happened very naturally. I was trying to sniff out what was going on because I had already reviewed the medical records and realized that it was kind of scant. We're going to get into what they are and they exist, but the actual objective testing doesn't support some of the injuries that this gentleman claims occurred that day. So when I asked him why he didn't report it, he did say he feared losing his job. We just got into
Isn't it common, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He had said that there were events that he had been under stress or strain, probably from his manager, and he felt he would have probably lost his job if he had become, looked as further of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said now, and as of that May 18th, he told his boss, I physically can't do this anymore. And it was just his back was bothering him way too much. So he shared that he would arrive to work, just to give you an idea, and for me to present this narrative of how hard this gentleman was working. He shared that he would log 9,000 steps before 7 a.m. or before 9 a.m. And for reference, I go to Disney with my young 9-year-old daughter, and after 12 hours pretty much in Epcot, which is gigantic, we log about 15,000 steps. And so in the 2 or 3 hours before this guy is starting his day, he's logging 2/3 of that number of steps, which is just, it shows you the amount of stress he's under.
Yeah, it's incredible, really. I mean, that's a lot of walking.
So he was off for a few days. This is all documented. He reported the lower back pain. He reported the leg pain got worse. And then he went to see his chiropractor it was about, I think, 10 days later. And he noted increased bilateral low back pain, more significant on the left. The doctor observed his walking, said, "You're dragging your left leg." So some of the objective kind of testimony is showing up in the medical record.
Mm-hmm.
And with the interview that I did with his wife, she shared that he was in a lot of pain afterwards. They even had a vacation scheduled 2 weeks later where they go to a campground every year, and they had to cancel the trip. She remembered it vividly. She said it was the first time that had ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
And he She also shared that she's now performing chores around the house, like mowing the lawn, and she'd never done that before. I mean, this is your typical proud, 60-year-old gentleman who would take care of a lot of these tasks.
Right. And, I think, Mike, also that shows that there is some good objective evidence in the medical record because we have the chiropractor and I think his wife as well talking about this dragging of his leg. This is a new symptom, and there are physical symptoms that are reported. That is objective evidence.
I agree. I took it all into account as I was trying to sort through this to get to my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So he did. The doctor completed FMLA paperwork a few weeks later in June, recommended for him to stay off work until further workup is done. In that, the doctor indicated leg weakness, dizziness, fatigue, tremors, ataxia, and the doctor also wrote that his leg is completely numb at times and feeling of heaviness present. And this is in the paperwork that the doctor filled out. And so then he went to see a neurology center, saw this physician who noted new numbness in the lower extremity, saw another doctor at the neuromuscular center, and they weren't really able to offer an objective explanation for why his back pain got worse. And they did mention it was in the context of a normal exam, consistent with a sensory predominant radiculopathy.
Mm-hmm.
They did also at this point mention he had some small fiber neuropathy, which was probably chronic for this gentleman. So he went to see another physician, a neurosurgeon, later that fall. This is about 4 months later. And he concluded he couldn't determine the cause of the numbness, and he did not recommend any surgery.
Okay.
So another doctor with physical medicine, PM&R, at a facility noted he had fairly significant progressive problems with his low back and lower extremity. He referenced a lifting event on May 7th and recommended shifting towards some physical therapy to treat this. He then got an MRI. He got an MRI back in June. This was compared to an MRI he had had 14 years prior. It did show some moderate disc degeneration and wear and tear, but it did not offer conclusive evidence of any disc disease or damage. So this is probably why my attorney was just getting so much pushback from this insurance company wanting to pay for these medical bills and cover this as a work injury.
Right. But, Mike, I think one thing we could say about that is that the results of that MRI and the physical exams and the client's own report, this is now pointing us in a direction, right? I mean, this is pointing us in a direction of a possible, fairly severe soft tissue injury.
Exactly. It's the challenge that I'm sure a lot of our attorney listeners deal with on a weekly basis, if not daily. So he remained under the care of his chiropractor, and the chiropractor described, again, in a report, that the symptoms began immediately after the incident. He suffered serious impairment of bodily function, reduced lumbar spine range of motion, reduced strength in the left lower extremity, and reduced ability to stand for extended periods of time. And it was his opinion that the incident at work aggravated or exacerbated a lumbar spinal condition that he had prior.
Okay.
Now, in this portion of the report, I title ongoing medical condition, and I get into a little bit more detail about where this Mr. Johnson is today. It was my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that he aggravated his previous spinal radiculopathy. And now has debilitating low back pain and lower extremity pain and numbness. And he's aware that some of his complaints are consistent with a distal symmetric neuropathy, but this doesn't explain the sudden onset of pain and loss of function that occurred after the work injury. So then getting into some of the specifics about his account, he's not getting relief from anti-inflammatories. His leg becomes so numb he has to crawl out of his car with assistance from his wife.
Wow.
During my phone interview with him, he got very emotional. He actually asked me, if I had to share everything, and he didn't want me to talk to his wife about it. But I asked him if I could put it in the report on his behalf, and he shared that he was even so depressed and feeling hopeless from this pain that he's even had suicidal thoughts. And he got emotional and started to have a difficult time talking.
Wow.
His daughter and his wife shared that he was shopping for a Harley Davidson just a month or two prior. He would help with the neighbor's lawn. And the daughter even said, I'd never seen my dad like this. I thought he was going to die. Often family members don't have medical training. They're not sure why they see someone decompensating. Mm-hmm. The daughter shared that her mom scared most nights because he lies in bed and moans in pain. You can see that the dramatic change this gentleman went through from what probably was a significant soft tissue injury.
Right.
So based upon my thorough review of the medical record, it was my opinion, within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that he aggravated his prior back condition and sustained an injury or an accumulation of injuries on that day that directly caused physical limitations, constant pain, and the inability to perform his regular work that was documented starting June 1st. And I did an abbreviated, this attorney didn't want me to go into a big estimated future care or medical care costs associated with this report. He simply asked me where he should turn next to maybe have some relief and what the rough estimate costs of those would be. And so I included 2 short paragraphs. Again, this wasn't a focus of my report. I think he was looking for a medical opinion as to the validity of this gentleman's claims, because he was getting pushback on secondary gain. So I finalized with suggesting that platelet-rich plasma injections have been shown to help, and that can be administered through a comprehensive pain clinic. Usual cost of treatment for resolution of that is about $40,000 in total. And then continuing physical therapy, usually twice a week for about 20 weeks. And because it's complicated, and I estimated about $7,200 for that, in addition to the fact that I thought all medical costs to date were reasonable, necessary, and related to this aggravation of a previous injury.
Yeah. So, Mike, I think this is an interesting case in a couple of different ways. And of course, as you know, and as many of our viewers know, what we're always trying to do to arrive at our conclusions, our opinions, and so forth is it always helps to have objective evidence, right? And so we're going to look at CT scans, MRI scans, if there's ultrasound or other things that we can hang our hat on. But here's a situation where those tests were either not done or were not positive, didn't help us to nail something down. So that leads us towards a soft tissue injury. And now you can see why the attorney wanted to get your opinion on this.
Sure. It's a tough one, Armin, right? Because we've talked about this a lot over the years, about this quote, hired gun mentality.
Right.
And I couldn't feel more unlike that in my own practice of this type of consulting. I take it very serious when I do these phone interviews. I purposefully ask some leading questions, or not trying to trick the client, but trying to make sure I really flesh out what is real and what they think they should say to me, or, depending on the injury. And in this case, this gentleman, hate to say passed with flying colors, but gosh, he had me downright passionately excited to represent his true injury and where he was at today, and in validating that with his wife and daughter. If they had coordinated this, then I think he deserves an Emmy, and frankly,
maybe an Oscar, who knows? Yeah.
Exactly. And all joking aside, I made that opinion confidently.
Right. So, that you bring up an interesting point, because sometimes I'm asked, particularly by physicians who are thinking about getting into this work, but asked about being a quote hired gun, right? And one of the great things about working with plaintiff and claimant attorneys is, as you know, Mike, these attorneys they value our straight up medical opinions. And of course, they don't want to be curing loser cases, right, with their time and with their money. And so if we feel the attorneys that we work with, if in those uncommon circumstances where there might be secondary gain or someone is malingering, the attorneys that we work with, they're quite happy to know that. And of course, they would just try to settle that case for what they can get in a reasonable amount of time. But we're never faced with the kind of secondary gain issues ourselves that may come up for physicians in other settings.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. So the fact that there wasn't a ruptured disc that you could see on MRI actually is helped us as a fact in the case to focus on soft tissue injuries. And as we know, soft tissue injuries in certain individuals can be very difficult, painful, cause functional loss. We can back that up with evidence from the medical literature. And it sounds like that's what you were able to do for this attorney, is help him to better negotiate and settle that case.
Yeah, there were enough bullet points for me to connect the dots that, again, all of the events in this gentleman's life, the visits to the chiropractor, the visits to the other doctors, they followed a very reasonable timeline. Mm-hmm. That did not seem suspicious in the least to me. I think if I was motivated to not want to pay out money for a claim, there's certainly holes that people could ask difficult questions because the lack of objective, studies or imaging. But in reality, the story seemed to make a lot of sense whenever you start to piece together the testimony of those around him, including the interview itself and the little bit of medical documentation that we did have.
Right. So, and as you mentioned early on in this episode, that this is a conundrum that our plaintiff attorneys and claimant attorneys are facing all the time, is how to deal with these serious, significant, and real soft tissue injuries that can be, in certain individuals, quite debilitating, as it was for this guy, enough to the point where he had, it sounds like, a major depressive disorder with intermittent suicidal ideation. And he really deserves some help for that.
I completely agree. It was an honor to write that report, as I feel with all of the reports that I put together.
Yeah.
So let's wrap it up there.
Good case.
By the scene. If you have any questions or comments, have a case, want to talk about anything, get some more information, see redacted reports, just email us, comments@physicianshelpingattorneys.com. Feel free to tune into our podcast where we casually go through various topics, cases, things that we find important or interesting in this work. And most of those episodes are kept 15 to 20 minutes. And we've really enjoyed doing all of these different various media outreach to these both physician and attorney listeners.
Great. That's great, Mike. And I think that wraps it up for today. And we'll see you all next time.
Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. We would like to thank you for tuning in to today's episode.
And we really want to help you to increase case value, save attorney time, and do it without breaking the bank.
We're really looking forward to 2024, and so go ahead and click that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you're notified of any new episodes.
And we look forward to having you on the next episode.